The security camera footage showed her standing on my lawn at 6:45 in the morning, clipboard in hand, photographing my house from every conceivable angle like she was documenting a crime scene. I watched the video on my phone while eating breakfast, already knowing this was going to be one of those days. Her name was Patricia Hendricks, and she was the HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates in Naperville, Illinois, a position she wielded like a medieval warlord commanding an army of bored retirees and power-hungry middle-aged suburbanites. I am Ethan Carter, a mechanical engineer who works from home 3 days a week, and I had just made what I thought was a responsible homeowner decision. 2 weeks ago, I had insulated siding installed on my 3-bedroom colonial. The old siding was original to the house from 1987, drafty as hell, and costing me a fortune in heating bills every winter. The new insulated siding was top of the line, energy efficient, and happened to be a perfectly acceptable shade of cream that matched half the other houses in the neighborhood. But apparently, Patricia had other ideas. The doorbell rang at 7:15, which I knew because I was still in my bathrobe drinking coffee and checking work emails. I opened the door to find Patricia standing there with 2 other women I recognized from neighborhood functions. One was Margaret Chen, the HOA secretary, a nervous woman in her 50s who always looked like she would rather be anywhere else. The other was Susan Waldrop, treasurer and Patricia's most loyal supporter, wearing a velour tracksuit despite the mild October weather. "Mr. Carter," Patricia said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to discuss the unauthorized modifications you have made to your property." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Good morning to you too, Patricia. I assume you are talking about my new siding. You did not submit the proper paperwork for approval before making exterior changes to your home. This is a direct violation of Meadowbrook Estates HOA bylaws, Section 4, subsection B. Actually, I did submit the paperwork 6 weeks ago. I have the certified mail receipt and the email confirmation." Patricia's face tightened. She was in her early 50s, with the kind of severe bob haircut that looked like it could cut glass, and an expression that suggested she had never experienced joy in her entire life. "That paperwork was incomplete. You did not include material samples." "The form did not request material samples. I included photos, manufacturer specifications, color codes, and installation timeline. Everything the form asked for. The siding you installed is not on the approved materials list." "There is no approved materials list in the HOA documents. I checked. Twice." Susan stepped forward, clutching a leather-bound binder like it was the Holy Bible. "The Architectural Review Committee has discretion to reject any modifications that do not maintain the aesthetic standards of the community." "The Architectural Review Committee," I said slowly, "consists of 3 people: Patricia, you, and Margaret. And according to the bylaws, you need a quorum to make any decisions. That means all 3 of you need to vote. Did you vote, Margaret?" Margaret looked at her shoes. "I was not at the last meeting. So there was no quorum, which means any decision made was invalid. I had done my homework." My sister Charlotte was a real estate attorney in Chicago, and she had helped me review every single page of the HOA documentation before I even submitted my application. Patricia's jaw clenched so hard I could hear her teeth grinding. "Regardless of procedural technicalities, the siding you installed is not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. I am issuing you a notice of violation. You have 30 days to remove it and restore your home to its original appearance." She thrust an envelope at me. I did not take it. "You cannot issue a violation for something that was never legitimately denied. I followed the process. I submitted the paperwork. I waited the required 45 days for review. When I heard nothing back, which the bylaws state constitutes automatic approval, I proceeded with the installation. Everything I did was by the book. "This is not over," Patricia said, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "I will not have the standards of this community eroded by people who think they can do whatever they want." She dropped the envelope on my doormat and stalked away, Susan following like a devoted disciple. Margaret lingered for a moment, looking apologetic. "I am sorry, Ethan," she said quietly. "I did not know about any of this until this morning. She called me at 6:30 and told me to be here." "It is okay, Margaret. I know you are just trying to keep the peace. For what it is worth, I think your siding looks nice, much better than before." She gave me a weak smile and hurried after the others. I picked up the envelope and went back inside, already composing an email to Charlotte in my head. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I should have known Patricia was planning something. On Wednesday afternoon, I was in my home office on a video call with my team when I heard vehicles pulling up outside. Multiple vehicles. I glanced out the window and felt my stomach drop. 2 Naperville police cruisers were parked in front of my house. 4 officers were standing on my lawn looking at the siding. And Patricia was there, gesturing wildly and talking to them like she was reporting a murder. I muted my microphone. "Hey guys, I need to take a 5-minute break. Personal emergency." I dropped off the call and headed downstairs, my heart pounding. By the time I got outside, Patricia was in full performance mode. "As you can see, officer, this is clearly not up to code. The installation is shoddy, the materials are substandard, and it poses a potential fire hazard to the entire neighborhood." "Madam," one of the officers said, sounding exhausted, "we cannot just visually inspect siding and determine if it is up to code. That is not how this works." "But I filed a complaint. You have to do something." The officer, whose name tag read Morrison, turned to me. "Sir, are you the homeowner?" "Yes. Ethan Carter. Can someone tell me what is going on?" Morrison gestured to Patricia. This woman called 911 claiming there was illegal construction happening at this address. When we explained that was not an emergency matter, she called back 3 more times until we agreed to send someone out. Patricia looked triumphant. "I am the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, and this man has violated multiple building codes and safety regulations." "What regulations specifically?" I asked. "The siding is not properly installed. It is a fire hazard. It does not meet structural requirements." Morrison looked at me. "Do you have permits for the work?" "Yes, city permits, all properly filed and inspected. The contractor was licensed and bonded. Everything was done by the book." I pulled out my phone and showed him the digital copies of all the documentation. He reviewed it, nodded, and turned to Patricia. "Madam, this appears to be a civil HOA matter, not a criminal issue. We cannot get involved in disputes about home aesthetics. This is not about aesthetics. This is about safety." "Then you need to file a complaint with the city building department. They will send an inspector out. But you cannot call 911 for this kind of thing. 911 is for emergencies. This community is full of families with children. A fire hazard is an emergency." The second officer, younger and clearly new, chimed in. "Madam, we have actual emergencies to respond to. This is not one of them. If you continue to make false emergency calls, you could be charged with misuse of 911 services." Patricia's face went red. "False." "I am reporting legitimate concerns as a community leader. You are wasting police resources," Morrison said flatly. "We are leaving. Sir, you have a good day. Madam, please use appropriate channels for this kind of complaint." They got back in their cruisers and left. I stood there on my lawn watching Patricia vibrate with rage. "You think you won," she hissed. "I am getting a city inspector out here, and when they red tag your house, you will wish you had just complied with HOA standards." "Do what you need to do, Patricia. I followed every rule." I am not worried. But honestly, I was a little worried, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I knew how these things could go. Bureaucracy was unpredictable. Inspectors were human. Sometimes things went sideways even when you had done everything right. Charlotte called me that evening. "Mom told me the cops showed up at your house. What the hell is going on?" I explained the whole situation while reheating leftover pizza. Charlotte listened without interrupting, which meant she was in lawyer mode. "Okay," she said when I finished. "First, document everything. Every interaction with Patricia, every email, every photo she takes. Second, get a copy of the city inspection report from when your siding was installed. Third, start a paper trail showing your compliance with HOA procedures. If she pushes this to a formal HOA hearing, you need to be ready to bury them in documentation." "Do you think she will actually get a city inspector to come out?" "Honestly, yeah, probably. Anyone can file a complaint with the building department. Whether the inspector finds anything is another matter. But Ethan, if your contractor did good work and everything was properly permitted, you have nothing to worry about. And if she keeps harassing me, then we look at legal options. Depending on how far she takes this, we might be able to pursue harassment charges or file a civil suit. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. One step at a time." After we hung up, I spent 2 hours organizing every piece of documentation related to my siding project. The original estimate from the contractor, the HOA application with all attachments, the certified mail receipt, the city permits, the inspection report from when the city inspector had signed off on the work, email correspondence with the contractor, photos from every stage of installation. I put it all in a 3-ring binder, chronologically organized with tabs and labels. If Patricia wanted a war of paperwork, I was ready. The city inspector showed up Friday morning. I was expecting it by then, so I had taken the day off work. His name was Robert Chen, no relation to Margaret as far as I knew, and he looked thoroughly annoyed to be there. "Mr. Carter, I am here about a complaint filed regarding your siding installation. Come on in. Can I get you some coffee?" He blinked, clearly not expecting hospitality. Sure. Black is fine." I made coffee while he set up his clipboard and tablet on my kitchen table. "For what it is worth," he said, "I already pulled the permit history on your address. The work was inspected and approved 2 weeks ago by Inspector Martinez. Everything looked fine in the report. So why are you here?" "Someone filed a formal complaint alleging code violations. When there is a complaint, we have to investigate, even if it seems frivolous. It is just how the system works." He looked embarrassed. "I am guessing this is HOA related. That obvious." 90% of these complaint calls are HOA disputes. People use the building department as a weapon against their neighbors. It is exhausting. Robert spent 45 minutes examining my siding. He checked the installation from the outside, looked at the ventilation gaps, measured the overlap, inspected the J-channels, examined the corners and trim. He took photos and made notes on his tablet. Then he asked to see my attic and crawlspace to check for proper ventilation and moisture barriers. I followed him around, answering questions and providing documentation when he asked. He was thorough, professional, and increasingly complimentary about the work. "This is excellent installation," he finally said as we stood in my front yard. "The contractor did a really good job. The insulated siding you chose actually exceeds current energy code requirements. The R value is higher than what is mandated for this climate zone. So there are no violations. None. Zero. This is better than code. Honestly, if every renovation I inspected was this well done, my job would be a lot easier. He made a few final notes on his tablet. I will file my report today. You will get an official copy in the mail, but the summary is that your property is in full compliance with all applicable building codes and that the quality of work exceeds standard requirements. Thank you. I really appreciate you being thorough. No problem, and between you and me. Whoever filed this complaint was wasting everyone's time, but you did not hear that from me. He grinned and headed back to his truck. I went inside and immediately called Charlotte. The inspector said everything exceeds code requirements. Beautiful. Make sure you get that report in writing, and then send a copy to Patricia and the HOA board with a polite but firm letter stating that all concerns have been addressed and the matter is closed. You think that will stop her? Probably not. But it establishes your position clearly. If she keeps pushing, she starts looking unhinged, which works in your favor. The official inspection report arrived in my mailbox on Tuesday. It was even better than I hoped. Robert Chen had written a detailed assessment noting that the insulated siding installation was exemplary and significantly exceeds minimum code requirements for thermal performance and weather resistance. He specifically noted that the R value of the siding provided superior energy efficiency compared to standard siding materials. I made 5 copies, 1 for my records, 1 for my contractor, 1 for Charlotte, and 2 for the HOA. I drafted a letter to accompany the copies I was sending to Patricia and the HOA board. Dear Meadowbrook Estates HOA board members, I wrote, keeping my tone professional and factual. This letter is in response to the notice of violation dated October 12th regarding the insulated siding installed on my property at 847 Oakmont Drive. As you are aware, I submitted a complete application for architectural review on August 28th, including all required documentation. Per HOA bylaws, the 45-day review period elapsed without formal response, constituting automatic approval. Additionally, a Naperville City building inspector conducted a thorough inspection of the installation on October 20th. Please find attached the official inspection report, which confirms that the installation is in full compliance with all applicable building codes and exceeds current energy efficiency requirements. As the siding installation has been confirmed to meet all legal and safety standards, I consider this matter fully resolved. Please update HOA records accordingly. Sincerely, Ethan Carter. I sent 1 copy via certified mail to Patricia's address and dropped off another copy at Margaret's house, since she lived just 3 streets over and had always been reasonable. Margaret answered the door in gardening gloves, looking startled. Ethan, hi, is everything okay? Everything is fine. I just wanted to give you this personally. I handed her the envelope. It is the city building inspection report about my siding. The inspector confirmed everything is up to code and actually exceeds requirements. I thought you should have a copy for the board records. She opened it and scanned the report, her eyes widening. This is really good. Patricia said you were refusing to cooperate with the inspection. Patricia said what? She sent an email to the board saying you were being difficult and trying to hide code violations. I felt anger rising but kept my voice calm. Margaret, I have cooperated with every single step of this process. I submitted proper applications, I got city permits, I welcomed the building inspector, and I have done everything by the book. Patricia has been the one escalating this unnecessarily. Margaret sighed, pulling off her gloves. I know. I have been on this board for 3 years, and I am so tired of the drama. Patricia treats every little thing like it is the end of the world. Last month she tried to fine the Johnsons because their grass was 3.5 inches tall instead of 3 inches. 3.5 inches. I measured it myself to prove her wrong. Why do you stay on the board? Because if I leave, Susan will just vote with Patricia on everything and there will be no voice of reason at all. At least now I can push back sometimes. She looked at the report again. I will make sure this gets into the official records. And Ethan, I am sorry you are dealing with this. Your house looks great. 3 days later, I got an email from Patricia. No greeting, no pleasantries. The Architectural Review Committee has reviewed the inspection report. While we acknowledge the siding meets minimum safety requirements, it remains in violation of community aesthetic standards. The color and texture are not consistent with the established character of Meadowbrook Estates. You are required to appear before the HOA board at the November meeting to address this violation. Failure to appear may result in fines and legal action. I forwarded the email to Charlotte with the subject line, "She cannot be serious." Charlotte called me within 10 minutes. "This is unbelievable. She is grasping at straws. Can she actually fine me for aesthetics when I followed the application process?" She can try, but it would not hold up if you challenged it. The problem is that fighting HOA fines usually requires hiring a lawyer and potentially going to court, which costs time and money. That is what she is counting on. Most people just give up because it is not worth the hassle. But I have you. Yes, you do, and I am getting increasingly annoyed with this Patricia person. I think I should come to this board meeting with you. You do not have to do that. I want to. This is exactly the kind of petty HOA tyranny that makes me crazy. Plus, I bill $400 an hour, and I would love to see Patricia's face when you show up with legal representation to her little kangaroo court. The November HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a bland beige building next to the neighborhood pool. I arrived with Charlotte 15 minutes early. About 30 other residents were already there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows. Patricia, Susan, and Margaret sat at a table at the front, looking very official. Patricia's expression when she saw Charlotte in a business suit carrying a leather briefcase was absolutely priceless. We sat in the front row. Charlotte pulled out a legal pad and began making notes, very deliberately and obviously. Other residents were watching curiously. Patricia called the meeting to order and went through the usual business. Financial report, landscaping updates, reminders about trash can placement. Then she got to new business. We have a violation matter to address. Ethan Carter has made unauthorized exterior modifications to his property that are not in compliance with community standards. I raised my hand. Point of order. The modifications were not unauthorized. I submitted proper application and received approval by default when the review period elapsed without response. Patricia ignored me. The Architectural Review Committee has determined, point of order, Charlotte said, standing up. I am Charlotte Olson, legal counsel for Mr. Carter. Before this proceeds, I would like to clarify several procedural issues. The room got very quiet. Patricia looked like she had swallowed a lemon. This is a board meeting, not a legal proceeding, Patricia said coldly. Lawyers are not necessary. Any meeting where fines or sanctions may be imposed is a quasi-legal proceeding where the homeowner has a right to representation. But if you prefer, we can skip this meeting and proceed directly to circuit court with a lawsuit for harassment and improper HOA governance. Your choice. Margaret looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Susan whispered something to Patricia, who held up a hand to silence her. Fine. Say what you have to say. Charlotte smiled pleasantly. Thank you. First, my client submitted a complete application for architectural review on August 28th. Here is the certified mail receipt showing it was received by the HOA on August 30th. The application included photographs, specifications, and color samples. According to Section 4, Subsection B of the HOA bylaws, the Architectural Review Committee has 45 days to render a decision. If no decision is communicated within 45 days, the application is automatically approved. The 45-day period expired on October 14th. No decision was communicated. Therefore, the application was approved. Patricia started to speak, but Charlotte continued. Second, the Architectural Review Committee consists of 3 members. According to the bylaws, a quorum of at least 2 members must be present for any official vote. At the October 10th meeting where my client's application was allegedly discussed and denied, only 2 members were present. Margaret Chen, can you confirm you were not at that meeting? Margaret nodded miserably. I was not informed there was a meeting, so any vote taken was invalid due to lack of proper notice to all committee members. Third, the City Building Department conducted a comprehensive inspection of the installation and found it exceeds all applicable code requirements. Here is the official report. She pulled out copies and walked them up to the board table. Fourth, and most importantly, there is no provision in the HOA bylaws that grants the board authority to reject properly installed, code-compliant improvements based purely on subjective aesthetic preferences. The bylaws allow you to enforce specific standards, which Mr. Carter has met. Charlotte sat back down. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Patricia's face was bright red. The board has discretion to maintain community standards. Discretion must be exercised reasonably and within the scope of the governing documents. Requiring a homeowner to remove properly installed, code-exceeding improvements because you personally do not like the color would be an arbitrary and capricious abuse of that discretion. Are you threatening to sue the HOA? I am informing you of the legal realities. If you attempt to fine or sanction Mr. Carter for improvements that were properly approved and legally compliant, yes, we will file suit, and we will win. And the HOA will be liable for our legal fees under Illinois statutes governing unreasonable HOA enforcement actions. Another resident raised his hand. He was an older guy I had seen around but never formally met. I have a question. If Ethan followed all the rules and got city approval, why are we even talking about this? A woman in the back spoke up. Yeah, I am confused. This seems like a waste of time. Patricia tried to regain control. The aesthetic standards of this community, his house looks fine, someone else called out. Better than it did before, honestly. The old siding was falling apart, another voice added. At least he is maintaining his property. Patricia was losing the room. I could see it happening in real time. The other residents were not on her side. They were tired of the drama. Margaret cleared her throat. I would like to make a motion. I move that we formally recognize Ethan Carter's siding installation as approved and compliant with all HOA standards, and that we close this matter without any fines or sanctions. I second that motion, said a man sitting near the back. Patricia looked like she might explode. You cannot second a motion. You are not on the board. Charlotte stood again. Actually, according to your bylaws, any homeowner in good standing can make motions from the floor during the new business portion of the meeting. The motion has been properly made and seconded. You need to call for a vote. Patricia glared at Margaret. You are on the Architectural Review Committee. You cannot undermine the committee's decisions. What decision? Margaret shot back, and I was surprised by the steel in her voice. We never voted. You and Susan decided on your own. That is not how this works, Patricia. I am calling for a vote, Susan interjected. All in favor of ignoring this ridiculous motion and maintaining our authority. That is not how you call a vote, Charlotte said. The motion on the floor is to approve Mr. Carter's installation and close the matter. The board votes yes or no on that motion, nothing else. Patricia knew she was beaten. Fine, all in favor. Margaret raised her hand immediately. There was a long, tense pause. Susan kept her hand down, looking at Patricia for guidance. Patricia did not raise her hand. 1 in favor, 2 opposed, Patricia said quickly. The motion fails. Actually, Charlotte said, 2 board members are present and the vote is tied 1-1. Susan, you need to vote. I vote no, Susan said defiantly. Still tied, I pointed out. What happens with a tie? Charlotte pulled out a copy of the bylaws. In the event of a tied vote, the motion fails unless there is a deciding vote from a quorum of the full board. Since there are only 3 board members and they are not all present, wait, Margaret is present. The tie stands. According to Robert's Rules of Order, which the bylaws specify as the governing procedural authority, a tied vote means the motion fails but the matter is not resolved. It would need to be revisited at a future meeting. Patricia looked triumphant. So the matter is not resolved, correct? Which means you also cannot impose fines or sanctions because you have not established a violation. We are at a stalemate. A woman I recognized as Linda Sawyer, who lived 2 streets over, stood up. I am so sick of this. Patricia, you have been on this board for 4 years and all you do is harass people about stupid stuff. Remember when you tried to ban my son's basketball hoop? Or when you said the Martinez family could not plant tomatoes in their backyard because it was too agricultural? This is ridiculous. Other people started voicing agreement. The meeting was devolving into chaos. Patricia tried to call for order, but people were standing up and leaving. This meeting is not adjourned, Patricia shouted. Yeah, it is, someone called back. We are done. Within 5 minutes, half the room had emptied. Margaret gathered her papers and left without saying anything to Patricia or Susan. Charlotte and I were among the last to leave. As we walked to our cars, Charlotte said, that went better than I expected. She is not going to let this go. Probably not. But she is also running out of options, and you saw the room. The other residents are not on her side. That matters. I drove home feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe Patricia would finally back off. Maybe this was over. I should have known better. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from a law firm in Chicago. Patterson, White and Associates, representing the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, is formally notifying you of the following violations and associated fines. The letter detailed $5,000 in fines for unauthorized exterior modifications, failure to comply with Architectural Review Committee decisions, and disrupting community standards. I called Charlotte immediately. They hired a lawyer, I told her. They are fining me $5,000. Forward me the letter. Now. I did. She called me back 30 minutes later. Okay, so this is actually good for us. They have now formally committed to a legal position in writing, and their position is completely indefensible. We are going to file a response, and then we are going to file a countersuit for harassment, abuse of process, and violation of the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act. What is that? It is the state law that governs HOAs. Among other things, it prohibits HOAs from imposing fines without proper notice, without a hearing, and without a legitimate basis in the governing documents. Patricia just violated all 3. Plus, we can argue that this is targeted harassment based on the timeline and her personal animus toward you. How much is this going to cost me? I will do this pro bono. I am so annoyed with this HOA that I want to take them down on principle. Consider it my public service for the year. Over the next 6 weeks, Charlotte filed a comprehensive response to the HOA's demand letter, a formal complaint with the Illinois Attorney General's office regarding HOA misconduct, and a civil lawsuit in DuPage County Circuit Court. The lawsuit named the HOA as an entity, Patricia personally, and Susan personally for abuse of their positions and violations of state law. The discovery process was fascinating. Charlotte subpoenaed all HOA records, emails, and meeting minutes for the past 2 years. What we found was stunning. Patricia had been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom. She had imposed fines on 17 different homeowners over the past 18 months, most of them completely unjustified. She had collected over $40,000 in fines and special assessments that were never properly authorized by the board or the membership. She had paid herself an undisclosed administrative fee of $15,000 that was never voted on or budgeted. She had hired her brother's landscaping company for neighborhood maintenance at rates 30% higher than market value. Margaret had been keeping copies of emails where Patricia explicitly discussed targeting homeowners she personally disliked. One email to Susan said, "We need to make examples of people like Carter who think they can do whatever they want. Hit them hard with fines until they comply or leave the neighborhood." It was damning. In January, we had our first court hearing. Patricia showed up with her lawyer, a tired-looking guy from the firm she had hired. Charlotte showed up with 3 bankers' boxes full of evidence. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Rachel Foster, read through the filings and looked unimpressed. "Counselor," she said to Patricia's attorney, "your client has imposed $5,000 in fines on a homeowner for installing siding that meets all building codes, was properly permitted, and was approved by default according to the HOA's own bylaws. Can you explain the legal basis for these fines?" Patricia's lawyer shuffled papers. "Your Honor, the HOA has broad discretion to enforce aesthetic standards. Does the HOA have a specific written standard that prohibits the type or color of siding Mr. Carter installed?" "Not specifically. But, so you are arguing that the HOA can impose fines based on subjective preferences rather than written rules. The Architectural Review Committee has discretion to interpret the standards. Except the committee never properly voted to reject Mr. Carter's application. According to the evidence, only 2 of 3 members were present at the purported decision meeting, and one of those members states she did not agree to the rejection. Is that accurate?" The lawyer hesitated. Patricia leaned over and whispered urgently to him. "Your Honor, there may have been some procedural irregularities, but the spirit of the HOA's authority," Judge Foster held up her hand. "I am not interested in the spirit of anything. I am interested in the law. Illinois statute is very clear that HOAs must follow their own bylaws and cannot impose arbitrary or capricious penalties. Based on what I am seeing here, this is textbook arbitrary and capricious enforcement. The fines are vacated. Mr. Carter owes nothing." Patricia stood up. "Your Honor, if I may, you may not. Sit down." Judge Foster turned to Charlotte. "Miss Olson, you have filed a countersuit alleging harassment and improper conduct. What are you seeking?" "Your Honor, we are seeking a declaratory judgment that my client's siding installation is proper and approved, an injunction against further HOA harassment, and damages for emotional distress and legal fees. We are also requesting that the court order an independent audit of the HOA's finances based on evidence of misappropriation of funds." The judge raised her eyebrows. "Misappropriation? That is a serious allegation. Yes, Your Honor, we have evidence that Miss Hendricks has collected unauthorized fines, paid herself unauthorized fees, and engaged in self-dealing with vendors. We believe a full audit will reveal significant financial misconduct. Patricia's lawyer looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Your Honor, these are inflammatory accusations without merit. Then you should have no problem with an audit, Judge Foster said dryly. She flipped through more pages. I am ordering a temporary injunction prohibiting the HOA from imposing any fines or sanctions against Mr. Carter, pending resolution of this matter. I am also ordering the HOA to produce all financial records for the past 3 years for independent review. We will reconvene in 60 days for a status hearing. Dismissed. We walked out of the courthouse into the cold January afternoon. Charlotte was grinning. That went perfectly. The judge hates HOA overreach cases. She is going to hammer them. What about the financial stuff? I did not know you were going to bring that up. The evidence was too good not to use. Patricia has been embezzling from the HOA, basically. When the audit comes out, she is going to have much bigger problems than you're citing. The audit took 6 weeks. It was conducted by a forensic accountant Charlotte knew from other cases. His report, when it finally landed, was devastating. Patricia had misappropriated over $67,000 from HOA funds over a 3-year period. She had created fake invoices, paid unauthorized bonuses to herself, diverted special assessment funds to her personal accounts, and engaged in kickback schemes with several vendors. Susan had been complicit in some of it, signing off on fraudulent expenses. Charlotte immediately filed an amended complaint adding fraud and theft charges. She also sent a copy of the report to the Naperville Police Department. On a Tuesday afternoon in early March, I was working from home when I saw police cars pull up again. This time, they were not there for me. Officers knocked on Patricia's door 3 houses down. I watched from my window as she answered, argued briefly, and then was led out in handcuffs. Across the street, the same thing was happening at Susan's house. The police executed search warrants on both homes, removing boxes of documents and computer equipment. News vans showed up an hour later. By evening, the story was on the local news. Homeowners Association president arrested for theft and fraud. Patricia Hendricks and Susan Waldrop face multiple felony charges for allegedly stealing thousands of dollars from their Naperville Neighborhood Association. Residents are shocked. They interviewed Margaret, who looked exhausted. I tried to raise concerns about the finances last year, but I was told to stay in my lane. I am just glad the truth is finally coming out. The criminal trial took several months. In the meantime, the HOA held an emergency election. Margaret was elected president. One of the first things she did was issue a formal apology to me and the 16 other homeowners who had been improperly fined. We are working to refund all improper fines and penalties, she announced at a community meeting. We are also revising our bylaws to include better oversight and transparency. What happened under the previous leadership was unacceptable, and we are committed to doing better. Patricia and Susan both eventually took plea deals. Patricia was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution of $67,000. Susan got 18 months probation and community service for her lesser role. The civil lawsuit settled in my favor. The HOA paid my legal fees and issued a formal declaration that my siding installation was fully approved and compliant. They also paid me $10,000 in damages for the harassment and stress. Charlotte refused to take any payment for her work. This was the most satisfying case I have had in years. Watching that judge tell Patricia to sit down was worth more than money. I used the settlement money to upgrade my windows to match the energy efficiency of my new siding. I submitted the proper HOA application, of course. Margaret approved it in 3 days. On a warm Saturday afternoon in May, I was mowing my lawn when a car pulled up. A couple in their 30s got out and walked up to me. "Hi, excuse me," the man said. "We are looking at houses in the neighborhood. Can I ask you about the HOA?" I shut off the mower. "How much time do you have?" They laughed, thinking I was joking. "No, seriously, there is a lot to tell you." I gave them the full story. They listened with expressions ranging from shock to horror to disbelief. "So the HOA president went to prison for stealing from the neighborhood?" the woman asked. "Yep. But the new leadership is actually reasonable. Margaret is doing a good job. She is focused on actual community maintenance and safety, not petty enforcement of arbitrary rules." That is insane. We have been looking at houses in HOA communities, and everyone has horror stories, but this takes the cake. "The thing is," I said, "HOAs are only as good or bad as the people running them. When you get power-hungry people who treat it like their personal kingdom, it becomes a nightmare. But when you get reasonable people who just want to maintain the community, it works fine. You just have to pay attention to who is on the board and what they are doing." They thanked me and left, probably to find a neighborhood without a recent embezzlement scandal. That evening I sat on my back deck with a beer, looking at my house. The insulated siding still looked great. My energy bills were down 40% compared to last winter. The windows I had just installed were going to drop them even more. Charlotte called to check in. "How are you doing?" "Good. Really good. The house is great, the neighborhood is peaceful, and Patricia is behind bars. I would say things worked out. You know she is going to write a terrible review of the community from prison, right?" I laughed. "Probably. But I do not think anyone is going to take her side." "Have you thought about running for the HOA board?" "God, no. I have had enough HOA drama to last a lifetime." "Fair enough. But you would be good at it. You actually care about doing things properly." "I will stick to engineering, thanks. Let Margaret handle the HOA politics." After we hung up, I thought about everything that had happened. The stress, the anger, the frustration of dealing with Patricia's petty tyranny. But also the satisfaction of standing my ground, following the rules, and ultimately being vindicated. I learned a lot through the whole ordeal. I learned that HOAs can be weapons of harassment in the wrong hands. I learned that documentation is everything when dealing with bureaucracy. I learned that standing up to bullies sometimes requires lawyers and courts and months of headaches. But I also learned that it is worth it. Not just for yourself, but for everyone else who comes after you. Patricia had been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. 17 families had paid unjust fines rather than fight back because fighting seemed too hard, too expensive, too uncertain. I was in a position where I could fight back. I had Charlotte's legal expertise. I had the time and resources to document everything and pursue it properly. And by doing that, I had not only cleared my own name but exposed a pattern of corruption that needed to be stopped. The other homeowners Patricia had targeted started coming forward after her arrest. Stories emerged of people who had been fined hundreds or thousands of dollars for trivial or manufactured violations. A single mother who had been fined for having a basketball hoop that was supposedly the wrong color. An elderly couple fined for having a garden gnome that violated the no lawn ornaments rule that did not actually exist in the bylaws. A young family fined for parking their car in their own driveway overnight because Patricia claimed it was a commercial vehicle, even though it was just a regular sedan with a small company logo on the door. All of those fines were refunded once the audit revealed they had been improperly imposed. The HOA insurance covered most of it, thankfully, so the other residents did not have to pay higher assessments to cover Patricia's crimes. Margaret worked tirelessly to rebuild trust in the HOA. She started sending monthly financial statements to all residents, showing exactly where the money was going. She created an online portal where anyone could review HOA documents, meeting minutes, and decisions. She formed committees with actual resident input instead of just rubber stamping everything herself. The neighborhood started feeling like a community again instead of a police state. In June, Margaret organized a neighborhood barbecue. It was the first one in years. Patricia had always found reasons to veto community events, claiming they were too expensive or too complicated to organize. But Margaret made it happen with volunteers and donated supplies. I brought potato salad and helped set up tables. Linda Sawyer brought her famous ribs. The Martinez family brought homemade tamales. Dozens of families showed up, and it turned into a really great afternoon. At one point, Margaret pulled me aside. "I wanted to thank you again. If you had not fought back against Patricia, none of this would have come to light. She would still be running the HOA like a dictator and stealing from all of us. I just did not want to get pushed around about my own house. I know, but it took courage. A lot of people would have just paid the fine and moved on. You stood your ground and everyone benefited from it. You are doing a great job as president. The neighborhood is lucky to have you," she smiled. "I am trying. It is a lot of work, but I actually want to help people, not control them. That makes a difference." As summer settled in, life returned to normal. I worked on my engineering projects, took bike rides around the neighborhood, and enjoyed my significantly lower utility bills thanks to the insulated siding and new windows. The whole drama with Patricia felt increasingly distant, like a bad dream that had finally ended. In August, I got an email from Robert Chen, the building inspector who had originally confirmed my siding exceeded code requirements. He had heard about the court case and Patricia's arrest. "I just wanted to reach out and say congratulations on your vindication," he wrote. "I see a lot of these HOA disputes in my work, and it is frustrating how often HOAs abuse their authority. It is nice to see someone fight back successfully. Your installation was excellent work, and I am glad the courts recognize that. If you ever need an expert witness for future property issues, feel free to reach out." I wrote back thanking him and hoping I would never need an expert witness for anything ever again. Charlotte sent me a news article in September. Patterson, White and Associates, the law firm that had represented the HOA, was facing professional discipline complaints for their role in pursuing baseless claims against homeowners. Apparently, multiple former clients had filed bar complaints once the truth about Patricia came out. "Karma is real," Charlotte texted. "I am just glad it is all over. Do you think you will ever move out of that neighborhood after everything that happened? Actually, no, I really like my house. The neighbors are good people. And now that Patricia is gone, the HOA is fine. Margaret is doing a great job. Why would I leave? Fair point. You fought for your right to stay there. Makes sense to enjoy it." One afternoon in October, almost exactly a year after Patricia had first shown up at my door with her clipboard and bad attitude, I was working in my front yard planting mums when a minivan pulled up. A woman in her 40s got out, looking harried and determined. My heart sank. "Not another Karen," I thought. "Hi," she said, walking up. "Are you Ethan Carter?" "Yes. Can I help you?" "I am Jennifer Morrison. I live over in the Willow Creek development about 3 miles from here. We have an HOA situation that is getting out of control, and someone told me I should talk to you." I stood up, brushing dirt off my hands. What kind of situation? Our HOA president is fining people left and right for crazy stuff. My neighbor got fined for having the wrong shade of mulch. Someone else got fined because their mailbox was half an inch too far forward. It is getting ridiculous, and everyone is too scared to push back. Why are you telling me this? Because I heard what happened here. I heard you stood up to your HOA president and she ended up going to jail for fraud. I need to know how you did it. I thought about saying this was not my problem. I had dealt with enough HOA drama for a lifetime. But then I thought about all the people Patricia had harassed and how relieved they were when someone finally stopped her. Okay, I said. Come inside. Let me make some coffee and I will tell you everything I learned. We sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours. I explained the importance of documentation, knowing your bylaws, following procedures exactly, and not being afraid to escalate when necessary. I gave her Charlotte's contact information. I told her about the Illinois Common Interest Community Association Act and how it limited HOA authority. The most important thing, I said, is that you cannot do this alone. You need other residents on your side. Build a coalition. Talk to your neighbors. Get people to come to board meetings. When the board sees that the community is against them, they lose power. Jennifer took detailed notes. This is so helpful, thank you. Just be prepared for it to be stressful and time-consuming. Fighting an HOA is not easy. I know, but someone has to do it. These people are making everyone miserable. After she left, I thought about what Charlotte had said months ago about running for my own HOA board. I still did not want to do that, but maybe there was another way to help. I started a blog called HOA Accountability, where I detailed my experience with Patricia and provided resources for other homeowners dealing with HOA problems. I explained common legal issues, shared template letters for responding to HOA violations, and provided information about state laws governing HOAs. The blog took off. Within a few months, I was getting emails from people all over Illinois and beyond, sharing their own HOA horror stories and asking for advice. Some of them were truly insane. HOAs banning certain dog breeds. HOAs dictating what color curtains people could have. HOAs prohibiting solar panels or vegetable gardens or children's play equipment. I could not help everyone, but I did what I could. I connected people with lawyers. I shared information about state and local laws. I provided moral support and validation that no, they were not crazy. Their HOA was being unreasonable. Charlotte contributed guest posts about legal strategies. Margaret wrote about how to reform an HOA from within. Robert Chen wrote about understanding building codes and when HOAs exceed their authority. It felt good to take something negative and turn it into something constructive. As another winter approached, I sat in my warm, energy-efficient house and reflected on the past year. The insulated siding was still performing beautifully. My heating bills were dramatically lower. The house was more comfortable than it had ever been, and Patricia was in prison where she belonged. I would not say I was grateful for the whole experience. It had been stressful and exhausting. But I was proud of how I had handled it. I had stood my ground. I had followed the rules. I had fought back against someone who abused their power. And in doing so, I had helped other people and made my community better. On New Year's Eve, Margaret hosted a small gathering at her house for some of the neighbors. We toasted to new beginnings and better leadership. We laughed about the absurdity of the whole Patricia situation. We made plans for community improvements in the coming year. As I drove home that night, past my house with its perfect insulated siding gleaming under the streetlights, I felt genuinely content. I had won my fight. I had protected my home and my rights. I had helped expose corruption and reform a broken system. And I had learned that sometimes standing up to a bully is hard and complicated and takes months of effort. But it is always, always worth it. The blog continued to grow. By spring, I had over 10,000 regular readers. I was getting interview requests from local news stations and newspapers. A few legislators reached out asking about HOA reform legislation. Jennifer Morrison from Willow Creek emailed to tell me they had successfully recalled their HOA board and elected new leadership. "We used everything you taught me. Thank you for giving me the courage to fight back." I printed that email and put it on my refrigerator. In March, Charlotte called with news. Patricia's attorney filed for early release. She has served a year and is claiming good behavior. "Are you kidding me?" The prosecutor is opposing it. They want her to serve the full sentence. "There is going to be a hearing." "Do I need to be there?" "It would not hurt. Victim impact statements carry weight." So I took another day off work and went back to court. This time, the courtroom was full of other homeowners Patricia had victimized. Linda Sawyer was there. The Martinez family. The elderly couple with the garden gnome. All of us ready to tell the judge why Patricia should serve her full sentence. The judge, a different one this time, listened to all of us. Then he denied Patricia's early release motion. "Miss Hendricks, you abused a position of trust. You stole from your neighbors. You harassed and bullied people who were simply trying to live in their homes. You have shown no genuine remorse and no understanding of the harm you caused. You will serve your full sentence." Request denied. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a sense of finality. This really was over. Patricia had no more cards to play. The legal system had worked slowly and imperfectly, but it had worked. Back in Naperville, spring brought beautiful weather and blooming flowers. I planted a vegetable garden in my backyard, something I had always wanted to do. Margaret approved it without question, of course. One Saturday morning, I was weeding the garden when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. "Hello, is this Ethan Carter, the HOA blog guy?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is David Park. I am a producer for a podcast called Power Trip. We cover stories about people who abuse positions of authority. I would love to talk to you about your experience with your HOA president." I thought about it. Did I really want to rehash all of this again on a podcast? But then I thought about all the people still dealing with abusive HOAs, all the people who felt powerless and alone. If sharing my story could help even a few of them, it was worth it. "Sure," I said. "I can do that." The podcast episode came out in May. It was an hour long, featuring interviews with me, Charlotte, Margaret, and several other homeowners. It was honest and detailed and did not shy away from how stressful and difficult the whole process had been. The episode went viral. Within a week, it had over 1 million downloads. News outlets picked up the story. Good Morning America did a segment on HOA abuse and featured my case as an example. My blog traffic exploded. I was getting hundreds of emails a day. The story resonated with people because everyone either had their own HOA nightmare or knew someone who did. Illinois State Representative Maria Gonzalez reached out personally. "I've been getting calls from constituents about HOA problems for years. Your story made me realize we need comprehensive reform. Would you be willing to testify before the state legislature about HOA accountability?" And that is how, on a humid afternoon in July, I found myself in Springfield testifying before a legislative committee about the need for stronger oversight of homeowners associations. I told Patricia's story. I explained how she had abused her authority, stolen money, and terrorized residents for years before being caught. I outlined specific recommendations for reform. mandatory financial audits, limits on fine amounts, requirements for proper notice and hearings, and penalties for board members who abuse their positions. The committee listened intently. Several legislators asked thoughtful questions. Representative Gonzalez thanked me for my courage in speaking out. 2 months later, the Illinois General Assembly passed the Homeowners Association Accountability Act. It incorporated many of the reforms I had suggested. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed it into law in October, with me and several other HOA reform advocates standing behind him at the signing ceremony. This law will protect Illinois homeowners from the kind of abuse and overreach that has plagued too many communities, the governor said. No one should be harassed in their own home by petty tyrants on power trips. I stood there thinking about how strange it was that replacing my siding had led to all of this. But that is how change happens sometimes. One person stands up, others join in. Eventually, systems change. After the bill signing, I drove back to Naperville feeling like something important had been accomplished. Patricia's crimes had exposed a larger problem, and now there were better protections for everyone. My house looked beautiful in the autumn sunlight, the insulated siding still perfect after 2 years. I pulled into my driveway, walked inside, and made dinner in my warm, energy-efficient kitchen. The HOA sent out its annual newsletter that week. Margaret's message focused on community, cooperation, and transparency. She listed all the improvements made over the past year: refinished pool, new playground equipment, upgraded common area lighting. She thanked residents for their patience during the transition to new leadership. There was no mention of Patricia. She had been erased from the neighborhood narrative, existing now only as a cautionary tale about what happens when small authority meets large ego. I thought that was appropriate. As November approached, marking 2 years since the whole thing started, I received one final piece of closure. Patricia was released from prison, having served her full sentence. She moved out of state immediately, her house having been sold while she was incarcerated. Susan and her family had also moved away months earlier, unable to face the neighborhood after everything that happened. The new families who bought their houses were nice people who got involved in community activities and followed reasonable rules without drama. On Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner for the first time. My parents came along with Charlotte and her husband, and a few neighbors who had become genuine friends through the shared trauma of the Patricia years. We ate too much food and told stories and laughed about how insane everything had been. We toasted to good siding, honest building inspectors, and the importance of reading your HOA bylaws. "What is next for you?" my dad asked. "Are you going to become a professional HOA fighter?" "God, I hope not. I think I have contributed enough to that cause. I am ready to just be a regular guy with a nice house and reasonable neighbors." "But you made a real difference," Charlotte said. "You changed state law. That is huge." "I know, and I am proud of that, but I also just want to live my life without drama. Is that too much to ask?" Everyone laughed, understanding completely. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I stood on my front porch looking at the quiet street. Lights glowed in windows. Families were inside, warm and safe, enjoying the holiday. This was what a neighborhood should be. Not a battleground ruled by petty bureaucrats, but a community where people looked out for each other and respected each other's right to live peacefully in their own homes. I went inside, locked the door, and turned on the fireplace. My house was warm and comfortable and mine. I had fought for it, protected it, and won, and that finally was enough.